They told me they didn't have it. Not in a harsh way. Just matter of fact. We wish we could help, my mom said. But things are tight right now. I was sitting at their kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug I hadn't touched. It's not a big amount, I said. I can pay it back. I just need a little time. My dad shook his head. It's not about that. We just don't have anything to spare. That was it. No hesitation. No room to push. I nodded once. Okay. That should have felt disappointing. It didn't. It felt clear. I left, figured it out on my own, and didn't think much more about it. Until 2 weeks later, when my aunt said, like I already knew, Marcus must be relieved. That debt's been hanging over him forever. Your parents really came through. I didn't react. Just stood there, holding a plate I wasn't eating from, waiting for her to say something that made it make sense. She didn't. Because to her, it already did. That should have felt like a misunderstanding. It didn't. Because I knew exactly where the money came from. The same place that had nothing left. 2 weeks earlier. I didn't grow up asking for much. Not because I was trying to prove anything. It just worked out that way. I moved out early. Took jobs that paid just enough, then a little more, then enough to stop thinking about it every day. Built things slowly. Nothing dramatic. Just consistent. My parents liked that about me. They'd say it in that same tone every time. You've always been independent. It sounded like a compliment. It just didn't come with anything else. Marcus was different. Always had been. More visible. Louder. The kind of person who made his problems known because he expected someone to help solve them. And usually, someone did. Most of the time, it was my parents. Not in a way they ever framed as favoritism. Just circumstances. He's going through something right now. It's just temporary. He needs a little help getting back on track. I'd hear those lines over the years, standing in the same kitchen, leaning against the same counter, nodding like it made sense. And it did, at least on the surface. I never needed anything like that. That was the difference. If something went wrong, I adjusted, picked up more work, cut back where I had to, found a way through it without making it anyone else's problem. That became part of how they saw me. Reliable, self-sufficient, low maintenance. That should have felt solid. It did. It just didn't come with support. By the time I was in my early 30s, things were stable. Not perfect, just working. I had my own place. Steady income. Enough saved that I wasn't reacting to every unexpected expense. Until something shifted. It wasn't a collapse. Not a crisis. Just a gap. A business deal that didn't land the way it was supposed to. Timing off by a few weeks. Money tied up longer than expected. Temporary, but real. I sat at my desk one evening, numbers open on the screen, tapping a pen lightly against the edge of the table. I knew I could solve it. It would just take time, and a little pressure I didn't need to carry. That was the first time it crossed my mind. Asking, not for a gift, not for anything open-ended, just a short-term loan, specific amount, clear timeline, clean plan. I leaned back in a chair, staring at the ceiling for a second. That should have felt uncomfortable. It did, but not enough to stop me. I drove over the next day. Same house, same driveway, nothing different about it. My mom opened the door. "Hey," she said. "You look tired." "Yeah, just a long week." She stepped aside, let me in. My dad was already in the kitchen. "Hey," he said. "Hey." I pulled out a chair, sat down, resting my hands lightly on the table. No build-up. No small talk stretched longer than it needed to be. "I need a little help," I said. They both looked at me. Not surprised. Just attentive. I explained it simply. What happened? What I needed. How long it would take to pay it back. No emotion in it. Just facts. They listened. That mattered. No interruptions. No immediate reactions. Just taking it in. When I finished, there was a small pause. My mom glanced at my dad. He leaned back slightly, exhaled. "We wish we could help," he said. There it was. Clean. No delay. My mom nodded. Things are just tight right now. I watched them for a second, not looking for anything hidden, just making sure I heard it right. "I could pay it back," I said. "We know," my dad replied. "It's not about that. It's just not there," my mom added. That should have been where I pushed. Ask more questions. Look for another option. I didn't, because I believed them. I nodded once. Okay. That was it. We sat there for a second longer. Not awkward. Just finished. I stood up, grabbed my keys. Let me know if anything changes, my mom said. Yeah, I said. I will. I walked out the same way I always did. No weight behind it. No sense that anything had shifted. That should have stayed a simple moment. It didn't. Because 2 weeks later, I realized it wasn't about whether they had it. It was about who they had it for. I didn't react when my aunt said it. That part matters. We were standing in the middle of a living room that was too warm, people talking over each other, plates moving around like no one planned to sit down. She said it casually, like it had already been talked about. Marcus must be relieved, she said. That debt's been hanging over him forever. I nodded once. Yeah. She smiled, lowering her voice slightly like she was sharing something positive. Your parents really came through for him. That should have been the moment I asked something. I didn't. I just shifted the plate in my hand, picked at something I wasn't hungry for. That's good, I said. She nodded. It really is. Then the conversation moved on. Just like that. I stayed for another hour. Talked to a few people. Listened more than I spoke. Normal. But something had already changed. Not outside. Inside. On the drive home, I didn't turn the radio on. Didn't call anyone. Just drove. Hands steady on the wheel, eyes on the road, replaying that one line. Your parents really came through for him. That should have felt like confusion. It didn't. It felt specific. When I got home, I set my keys down, stood in the kitchen for a second, then pulled out my phone. I didn't call my parents. I didn't call Marcus. Instead, I sent a message to someone who would know. Simple. Hey, do you know what my aunt meant about Marcus? I set the phone down on the counter. Waited. The reply came a few minutes later. Yeah, they cleared his debt. I stared at the screen. Read it again. Then once more. That should have felt like a misunderstanding. It didn't, because I knew exactly what that meant. I typed back. When? 3 dots. Then. Recently. Like a couple weeks ago, I think. I leaned against the counter, phone still in my hand. 2 weeks. The exact space between that conversation at the kitchen table and this. I didn't respond. Didn't ask for more details. I already had enough. I sat down at the table, pulling out the chair slowly, like I was trying not to rush anything. Then I did something I hadn't done in a while. I went back through the numbers. My own. The amount I asked for. The timeline. The plan I'd laid out. Clear. Reasonable. Temporary. Then I thought about what they gave him. I didn't know the exact number yet. But I knew Marcus. I knew what kind of debt followed him around. It wasn't small. That should have made me angry. It didn't. Not immediately. It made me still. I picked up a pen from the table, turned it between my fingers, then set it down again. There was a version of this where I called him right then. Asked directly. Forced the conversation into the open. I didn't. Because I already understood something. It wasn't that they didn't have it. It was that they didn't have it for me. That distinction landed heavier than anything else. Not emotional, just precise. I stood up, walked to the sink, ran the water for no reason, then turned it off again. My reflection in the window looked the same as it always did. Nothing had changed, except something had. I thought back to the kitchen table, my dad leaning back in his chair, my mom saying, "Things are tight." The way it sounded, certain, genuine. That was the part that stayed. Because I didn't think they were lying. Not exactly. They believed it. In that moment, they genuinely didn't have anything left to give. For me, I let that sit. Didn't push it away. Didn't soften it. For years, I'd watched the pattern without naming it. Marcus needed something. It was found. I managed on my own. It was respected. That should have felt balanced. It didn't. It was just convenient. And now, for the first time, I had proof. Not a feeling, not an assumption, a fact. 2 weeks. That was all it took to make it visible. I sat back down at the table, hands flat against the surface, looking at nothing. That should have broken something. It didn't. It clarified it. Because this wasn't about money. Not really. It was about understanding, finally, what had always been there. Just never this clear. I didn't call them. Not that night. Not the next day, either. That surprised me. because there was a version of this where I picked up the phone immediately, asked the question directly, forced them to explain it in real time. I didn't. I just sat with it. The first day it stayed quiet. I went through my routine like nothing had changed. Work, calls, small decisions that didn't carry any weight outside themselves. But underneath it, something had shifted. Not loud, just steady. That night, I sat at my desk again, same numbers open, same gap I was working through. I adjusted a few things, moved money from one place to another, cut back on something I didn't really need. It wasn't enough yet, but it was closer. That should have felt stressful. It didn't. It felt manageable, because now I knew something I didn't know before. I wasn't waiting on anything anymore. The second day, I thought about calling. Phone in my hand, contact open, thumb hovering over the screen. I could hear how the conversation would go. "Hey, I heard you helped Marcus." A pause, an explanation, maybe partial, maybe clean, something that would try to make it make sense. I lowered the phone without dialing, because I already understood it, and I wasn't sure there was anything they could say that would change that. That should have felt like giving up. It didn't. It felt like deciding not to ask a question I already had the answer to. Over the next few days, I noticed how far back it went. Not just this. Everything. Marcus always had a reason. Something temporary. Something urgent. Something that needed attention right now. And my parents responded to that. Consistently. I didn't have those moments. Or if I did, I handled them. Quietly. I remember one time, years earlier, when I mentioned something in passing. A smaller version of this. Just a tight month. My mom had said, "You always figure it out." I nodded at the time. Didn't think much of it. Now it landed differently. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling, letting that line replay. "You always figure it out." That should have felt like support. It didn't. It felt like permission not to help. I got up, walked into the kitchen, poured a glass of water, then set it down untouched. The apartment was quiet. No one else in it. No one to explain anything to. That made it easier. By the third day, the anger I expected still hadn't shown up. Not the way I thought it would. No sharp reaction. No urge to confront. Just clarity. I sat at the table again, pen in my hand, tapping it lightly against the surface. Once. Twice. Then I stopped. This wasn't new. That was the part that settled in. The money was new. The timing was obvious. But the pattern, that had always been there. I had just never needed anything big enough to see it this clearly before. That should have made it worse. It didn't. It made it simpler. Because once you see something clearly, you stop trying to interpret it differently. I pulled my laptop closer, went back to the numbers, adjusted them again. Longer timeline this time. More effort. More discipline. But worked. I sat there for a second, looking at it, then closed the screen. That was the decision. Not spoken. Not dramatic. Just done. I wasn't going to ask again. Not now. Not later. That should have felt like distance. It didn't. It felt like alignment. Because the situation hadn't changed. Just my understanding of it. I stood up, grabbed my keys, headed out for a walk without thinking about it. Cool air. Quiet street. Normal. For the first time since I heard about it. I wasn't replaying the conversation at the kitchen table. I wasn't thinking about what they said, or what they didn't say. I was just moving forward. And that's when it settled completely. They made a decision. About who needed help, and who didn't. That should have hurt more. It didn't. Because it wasn't a surprise anymore. It was a confirmation. And once I had that, I didn't need anything else from them to understand it. I closed the gap myself. Not quickly. Not easily, but clean. I adjusted everything. Cut back where I could. Took on extra work I would have turned down a month earlier. Moved timelines around until the numbers lined up without needing anything from anyone else. It took longer than it would have with help. That was expected. One evening, I sat at the same desk, looking at the final version of it. Balanced. No missing pieces. I tapped the pen once against the edge of the table, then set it down. That should have felt like relief. It didn't. It felt complete. I didn't tell them. That part was intentional. Not out of pride. Just there wasn't a reason to. Weeks passed, then months. Nothing changed on the surface. I still showed up to family dinners, still sat at the same table, still listened to the same conversations moving around me. Marcus talked about things like nothing had shifted. My parents acted the same way they always did. Warm, familiar, unaware. That was the part that stayed consistent. No one mentioned it. Not the loan, not the debt, not the 2 weeks that connected them. At first, I thought that might bother me. It didn't, because I wasn't waiting for them to bring it up. What changed wasn't what I said. It was what I stopped doing. I stopped offering more than what was there. Stopped extending conversations past what they naturally held. Stopped filling space with things that made it feel closer than it actually was. At dinner one night, my mom asked, "You've been busy lately?" I nodded. Yeah. With work. Yeah. She waited, like she expected more. There wasn't more. That should have felt distant. It didn't. It felt accurate. My dad noticed it before she did. He always did. One evening, my phone rang. His name. I picked up. Hey, he said. You got a minute? Yeah. A pause. Not long. Just enough to signal something. Everything all right? He asked. Yeah. You sure? I leaned back in my chair, looking at nothing in particular. Yeah. That could have ended there. It didn't. You've been quieter, he said. I nodded slightly, even though he couldn't see it. Probably. Another pause. What's that about? There it was. I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't know what to say, because I wanted to say it once. Clean. You told me you didn't have anything to spare, I said. Silence. Then, yeah. I tapped my finger lightly against the arm of the chair. 2 weeks later, you cleared Marcus's debt. No build-up. No emotion in it. Just placed. The line went quiet. Longer this time. I didn't know you knew about that, he said. I didn't at the time. Another pause. That was different, he added. I nodded once. I know. That should have turned into a back and forth. It didn't. Because I wasn't asking him to explain it. I respect that it's your money, I said. And your decision. He didn't respond. I just needed you to know I understand what the decision was. Silence again. Not empty. Just sitting there. Marcus needed it more, he said finally. I leaned back slightly, letting that settle. I know, I said. A small pause. That's what I'm telling you. That line hung there. Not confrontational. Just clear. He didn't respond right away. I could hear him breathing on the other end. I asked you for help once, I said. No change in tone. No drama in it. Just once. Another pause. I won't ask again. That should have sounded like a threat. It didn't. Because it wasn't. It was just the result. We stayed on the line a few seconds longer. Neither of us adding anything. Then he said, all right. Quiet. All right. I repeated. We ended the call there. No resolution. No attempt to smooth it over. That should have felt unfinished. It didn't. Because for the first time, everything that needed to be said had actually been said. Once. Clearly. Without anything extra around it. And that was enough. Nothing changed right away. That was expected. The next time I went over, it looked the same. Same house. Same table. Same routine. My mom asked if I wanted coffee. I said yes. My dad was already sitting down, flipping through something on his phone like he always did. Marcus showed up late, talking about something that didn't matter. Normal. No one mentioned the call. Not directly. That should have felt strange. It didn't. Because I wasn't expecting it to come up. What changed wasn't what they said. It was what I noticed. My mom checked him more. Not in a heavy way. Just slightly more often. You've been working a lot. Yeah. You eating okay? Yeah. She'd wait half a second longer than before. Like she was listening for something underneath the answer. There wasn't anything. My dad called more. Short calls. Nothing specific. Just seeing how things are going. They're good. All right. That was it. No follow-up. But the calls kept coming. That should have felt like repair. It didn't. It felt like adjustment. Marcus never brought it up. Not once. Same tone. Same presence. If anything, he seemed more relaxed than before. Like something that had been hanging over him was gone. That should have bothered me. It didn't. Because I wasn't measuring it anymore. I stopped tracking what they gave him. Stopped comparing it to anything. That part was over. What stayed was distance. Not visible, but consistent. At dinner one night, my mom was talking about something small. A neighbor. A repair. Something that didn't matter. I listened. Nodded. But I didn't lean into it. Didn't ask follow-up questions. Didn't extend the conversation beyond what it was. At one point, she looked at me and said, "You seem tired." I shrugged slightly. "Just busy." She nodded. "Okay." That should have turned into concern. It didn't, because she didn't push it. That was the new balance. Less assumed closeness. More careful space. A few weeks later, she dropped something off at my place. Food. Containers stacked neatly, like she used to do when I first moved out. "I made extra," she said. I took it, stepped aside to let her in. She walked around a little, looking at things. "You've got this set up nicely," she said. "Thanks." She nodded, hands resting lightly on the back of a chair. We stood there for a second. No urgency to fill it. "I didn't realize things were that tight for you," she said. There was not the full conversation, just the edge of it. I leaned against the counter, arms relaxed. "They weren't," I said. "It was temporary." She nodded slowly. "I would have helped if I could." That line. Same as before. I looked at her. I know, that should have led somewhere. It didn't, because we both understood what that meant now. She stayed a few more minutes. Talked about small things. Then left. I stood in the kitchen after the door closed, looking at the container she brought. Still warm. Still familiar. That should have felt like closeness. It didn't. It felt like effort. And effort wasn't the same thing. Months passed like that. Nothing dramatic. No confrontation. No repair that changed everything at once. Just small adjustments. Calls. Visits. Small gestures that didn't try to undo anything. That should have felt incomplete. It didn't, because I wasn't waiting for it to become something else. I had already seen it clearly. And once you see something clearly, you stop trying to turn it into something it's not. The relationship didn't end. It just changed temperature. Cooler. Quieter. More accurate. And for the first time, I wasn't filling in the gaps for them anymore. It stayed that way. Not broken. Not repaired. Just different. I kept seeing them. Holidays. Dinners. Occasional visits that didn't carry more weight than they actually held. Nothing stopped. Nothing reset. That was the reality of it. My dad still called. Short conversations. "How's work?" "Good." "Everything's steady." "Yeah." He didn't circle back to what I said that night. Not directly. That should have felt like avoidance. It didn't. It felt like something he didn't know how to revisit. My mom kept showing up in small ways. Food. Messages. Questions that stopped just short of anything uncomfortable. "You've been on my mind. Hope you're getting some rest." I'd read them, reply simply, "Thanks. I'm good." That was enough. Marcus stayed exactly where he'd always been. Close to them. Comfortable in it. He never brought up the debt. Never mentioned anything about that time. That should have bothered me. It didn't, because his role in this hadn't changed. Only my understanding of it had. One evening, months later, I was back at their house. Same kitchen. Same table. I noticed that again. Not because it was different. Because I was. My mom was talking about something small. A trip someone was planning. My dad nodded along. Marcus added something halfway through, laughing at his own comment. I sat there, listening, hands resting on the table. Present, but not invested in the same way. At one point, my dad looked over at me. "You've been doing well," he said. I nodded. "Yeah, that's good," he added. I held his eye for a second. "Yeah, that should have turned into more." It didn't, because we both knew where the conversation stopped. After dinner, I stepped outside for a minute. Cool air. Quiet. Same as always. My dad came out a few minutes later. Stood beside me, hands in his pockets. We didn't speak right away. "I've been thinking about what you said," he said finally. I nodded once. "Okay." He looked out toward the street. "You've always handled things on your own." I let that sit. "Yeah, that's just how it's been," he added. I glanced at him. "That's how it ended up." He nodded slightly, not correcting it, just taking it in. That should have turned into an explanation. It didn't, Because we both understood it without needing to say more. I didn't mean for it to land the way it did, he said. I leaned back slightly against the railing. I know. That was true. He looked at me then. Doesn't change it, he said. I shook my head. No. We stood there for a second. No tension. Just clarity. I thought I was doing the right thing, he added. I gave a small nod. I know. That should have softened it. It didn't. Because understanding the intention didn't change the outcome. I can't go back and change it, he said. I looked at him. I'm not asking you to. That was the point. We stayed there a little longer. Then he nodded once and went back inside. That was the closest we came to revisiting it. Not a full conversation. Not a resolution. Just acknowledgement. After that, things continued the same way. Small efforts. No big corrections. I stopped looking for anything else. That was the shift. For a long time, I thought I needed something from them. Recognition. Balance. Some version of fairness that matched what I thought it should look like. I don't think that anymore. Because what happened wasn't about one decision, or one moment, or even the money. It was about finally seeing something clearly. For years, I thought my independence was something I chose. Something I built because I didn't want to rely on anyone. That wasn't completely true. Part of it was assigned. I was the one who could handle things. So I did. Marcus was the one who needed help. So he got it. That was the system. Not spoken, but consistent. And once I saw it, I stopped trying to step outside of it. That should have felt limiting. It didn't. It felt accurate. Because the truth is, I had built everything myself. Not because I was stronger. Not because I was better. Just because that was the role I ended up in. And once I accepted that, I stopped measuring it. Stopped comparing what I got to what he got. Stopped expecting the same decisions to be made in my favor. That didn't make it fair. It just made it clear. I still go over. Still sit at the table. Still have the same conversations. But I don't bring expectations with me anymore. That changed everything. Because without expectation, there's nothing to be disappointed by. Just what is. I think about those 2 weeks sometimes. Not often, but enough. The gap between what they told me and what they did. That should have felt like betrayal. It didn't. It felt like confirmation of something I had always sensed, but never had a reason to fully believe. Now I do. And oddly, that made things easier. Not warmer. Not closer. Just honest. I don't ask them for anything now. Not because I'm trying to prove a point. Because I already know the answer. And I don't need to hear it again. What I needed was clarity. And I got it. 2 weeks was all it took. Not to change anything. Just to finally see it the way it had always been. I don't think about fairness the same way anymore. Some things don't balance out. They just show you what was already there. If this kind of thing feels familiar, you'll understand why I keep telling these stories over at Where Silence Ends. And I'm curious, have you ever been told there was nothing left, only to watch it appear for someone else?